In 1810, a pound of sugar cost the average English worker a full day of wages. By 1900, factory workers were stirring it into their tea 3 times a day. That shift from luxury to staple changed the world more than almost any other commodity in history. But sugar's story does not start in England or on a plantation. It starts in a jungle, about 10,000 years ago. On the island of New Guinea, deep in the South Pacific, indigenous people discovered something growing wild in the tropical lowlands. A tall, thick grass with a fibrous stalk. They pulled it from the ground, bit into it, and tasted something no human had ever tasted before in that form. Pure, concentrated sweetness. Raw sugarcane. For thousands of years, that was the extent of sugar's reach. People in New Guinea and across the Pacific Islands chewed on raw sugarcane for energy and enjoyment. There was no refining, no processing, no trade. Just people biting into a stalk and enjoying the juice. It spread slowly across Southeast Asia, island by island, generation by generation, through migration and early trade routes. By around 3500 BC, sugarcane had reached the Indian subcontinent. And that is where everything changed. Ancient Indian farmers did not just chew the cane. They figured out how to crush it, boil the juice, and let the liquid crystallize into a rough, brown solid. They called it khanda, which is where the English word candy comes from. For the first time in history, sugar could be stored and transported. It was no longer tied to the stalk. India had essentially invented sugar as a product. The texts from this period describe it almost reverently, and physicians across the subcontinent began prescribing it as medicine for headaches, stomach problems, and even impotence. Sugar was sacred. Around 326 BC, Alexander the Great sent his armies east into India. His soldiers came back with stories of a remarkable plant. Nearchus, one of Alexander's officers, described finding a reed that produces honey without bees. The Greeks were stunned. They had honey, of course, but the idea that sweetness could come from a grass growing out of the ground seemed almost impossible. And yet, even with this discovery, sugar remained an exotic curiosity in the Western world for centuries. It was too expensive, too difficult to transport, and too far away to matter to everyday life in Greece or Rome. When sugar did appear in Roman pharmacies centuries later, it was sold in tiny quantities at prices that only the wealthiest citizens could afford. Roman doctors prescribed it for stomach ailments and eye infections. A single pound could cost the equivalent of a month's wages for a common laborer. Sugar was not food, it was medicine. And it stayed that way in Europe for nearly 1,000 years. The people who truly unlocked sugar's potential were Arab traders and chemists during the Islamic Golden Age. Between the 7th and 13th centuries, Arab scholars perfected the process of refining sugar. They developed techniques for purifying the crystals, creating sugar that was whiter, finer, and longer lasting than anything India had produced. They built sugar mills across Persia, Egypt, and North Africa. They planted sugarcane wherever the climate allowed. And they began trading refined sugar across the known world. By the time European crusaders arrived in the Levant in 1096, sugar was already woven into Middle Eastern cuisine and medicine. The crusaders tasted it and lost their minds. They called it a most precious product, and knights started hauling bags of it back to Europe, along with their swords and holy relics. Venice, sitting at the crossroads of East and West, became the sugar gateway to Europe. Venetian merchants imported raw sugar from the Middle East, refined it in their own facilities, and sold it across the continent at staggering markups. For a period of about 200 years, Venice essentially held a monopoly on European sugar, and the profits were enormous. In medieval Europe, sugar was treated the way we treat gold today. Kings displayed sugar sculptures at royal banquets as demonstrations of wealth. English monarchs kept detailed sugar inventories the way modern governments track gold reserves. At the wedding feast of Henry III in 1236, the royal household purchased over 300 pounds of sugar for a single celebration, a sum worth more than a knight's annual income. Apothecaries locked it behind their counters alongside opium and rare spices. It was prescribed for everything from coughs to depression. If you could afford sugar, you were somebody. And if you could not afford it, you probably never tasted it. But there was a problem. Sugarcane needs tropical or subtropical climates to grow. You cannot grow it in England. You cannot grow it in France. And you definitely cannot grow it in Scandinavia. European demand was skyrocketing, but the supply chain depended entirely on trade with the Islamic world. A trade route that was expensive, unreliable, and politically fraught. This is the part of sugar's history that most people never learn about. And it is the part that shaped the modern world more than almost anything else. In the 1400s, Portugal began colonizing Atlantic islands. Madeira, the Canary Islands, São Tomé, off the west coast of Africa. They discovered that these islands had the perfect climate for sugarcane. Portuguese planters set up the first European-controlled sugar plantations, and they needed labor. First, they used convicts and poor Europeans. That did not last. Sugar cultivation is brutal. Planting, harvesting, and processing sugarcane requires back-breaking labor in extreme heat, often 18 to 20 hours a day during harvest season. Workers dropped from exhaustion, injury, and disease, so Portugal turned to enslaved Africans. The sugar plantations of São Tomé became a testing ground for what would become the most horrific labor system in modern history. And when Columbus crossed the Atlantic in 1492, he brought sugarcane cuttings with him on his second voyage. The Caribbean climate was perfect, the soil was perfect, and the demand back in Europe was insatiable. The process of making sugar was itself a kind of hell. After cutting the cane by hand with machetes in tropical heat, workers had to feed the stalks into massive grinding mills within hours before the juice spoiled. The mills were powered by oxen, water, or later by wind, and they operated around the clock during harvest season. Workers who fed the cane into the rollers risked losing fingers, hands, and arms. Plantation owners kept hatchets nearby so that a trapped limb could be severed quickly before the entire body was pulled through. After grinding, the juice was boiled in a series of copper kettles over roaring fires, each one hotter than the last. The boiling house was suffocatingly hot, often reaching temperatures above 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Burns from splashing molten sugar were constant. The work never stopped. What followed was an explosion of sugar production that reshaped the entire Atlantic world. Spain, Portugal, England, France, and the Netherlands all scrambled to establish sugar colonies in the Caribbean and South America. Barbados, Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, and Brazil became sugar factories. By the 1650s, tiny Barbados, an island roughly the size of San Antonio, Texas, was producing more sugar than all of Brazil, and it was the most valuable colony in the entire British Empire, more valuable than all the North American colonies combined. The human cost of this was catastrophic. Between the 1500s and the 1800s, roughly 12.5 million enslaved Africans were forced onto ships and transported across the Atlantic. A massive portion of them ended up on sugar plantations. The conditions were so brutal that the average life expectancy of an enslaved person on a Caribbean sugar plantation was 7 years after arrival. 7 years. Plantation owners calculated that it was cheaper to work people to death and buy replacements than to provide humane living conditions. Sugar did not just benefit from slavery. Sugar drove slavery. It was the economic engine that made the entire transatlantic slave trade profitable. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. A planter choosing sugarcane over tobacco or cotton on a Caribbean island set in motion a system that would define global economics for 300 years. By the 1700s, sugar had become the most valuable commodity traded in the Atlantic world, more valuable than tobacco, cotton, or coffee. The profits built mansions in London and Paris. They funded navies and wars. The so-called triangle trade moved manufactured goods from Europe to Africa, enslaved people from Africa to the Caribbean, and sugar from the Caribbean back to Europe. Every corner of this triangle dripped with sugar money. England became particularly obsessed. By 1700, the average English person consumed about 4 pounds of sugar per year. By 1800, that number had jumped to 18 pounds per year. Sugar went from a luxury that only the wealthy could afford to something the middle class expected in their tea every afternoon. This was not an accident. British merchants and politicians actively pushed sugar consumption because the colonies generating it were making them fabulously wealthy. But sugar plantations also created something the colonial powers did not expect: resistance. On the French colony of Saint-Domingue, what we now call Haiti, enslaved workers on sugar plantations launched the only successful large-scale slave revolt in history. In 1791, hundreds of thousands of enslaved people rose up, burned the plantations to the ground, and fought a 12-year war against French, Spanish, and British armies. By 1804, they had won their independence. Haiti became the first free black republic in the Western Hemisphere, and it was born on sugar plantations. If you are finding this video interesting, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this every week, and you will not want to miss what is coming next. The Haitian Revolution sent shockwaves through Europe. France lost its most profitable colony overnight. Napoleon, who had dreamed of a sugar empire in the Americas, was forced to pivot. He sold the Louisiana Territory to the United States in 1803 for about $15 million, roughly 4 cents per acre, partly because without Haiti's sugar revenue, holding that massive territory made no financial sense. Sugar's collapse in Haiti literally doubled the size of the United States. Napoleon was also stuck with another problem. Britain's Royal Navy had blockaded French ports, cutting off access to Caribbean sugar. France needed sweetness, and it needed a domestic source. So Napoleon turned to sugar beets. German chemist Andreas Marggraf had discovered decades earlier that European beets contained sucrose identical to cane sugar. Napoleon poured resources into beet sugar production, ordering tens of thousands of acres planted across France and offering cash bounties to farmers who converted their fields. He established research institutions dedicated solely to improving beet sugar yields. It worked. By 1813, France was producing millions of pounds of beet sugar per year. The monopoly that tropical sugarcane had held for thousands of years was broken. This created a sugar rivalry that persisted for over a century. Tropical cane sugar versus temperate beet sugar, Caribbean colonies versus European farms. The competition drove prices down and production up. By the mid-1800s, sugar was cheaper than it had ever been in human history. And cheaper sugar meant more sugar in more products consumed by more people. The Industrial Revolution accelerated this even further. Steam-powered mills could crush sugarcane faster and more efficiently than any human or animal-powered system. Railroads could transport raw cane from fields to factories in hours instead of days. Refining technology improved until producers could create sugar so white and so fine that it bore no resemblance to the rough, brown crystals of ancient India. White sugar became a symbol of purity and modernity. Brown sugar, the less refined version, was seen as inferior, even though it was functionally the same product with trace minerals left in. And then came the marriage that would define modern eating habits: sugar and tea. Britain was already importing massive quantities of tea from China, but tea on its own is bitter. Adding sugar made it palatable to working-class tastes. By 1850, British workers were consuming an average of 2 cups of sweetened tea per day. Sugar imports to Britain doubled between 1840 and 1860 alone. The government actually lowered tariffs on sugar imports specifically to keep the working class fed and productive. Cheap sweetened tea became the unofficial fuel of the British Empire, and the sugar colonies existed to keep it flowing. By the late 1800s, sugar had infiltrated every corner of Western cuisine. Jams, candies, baked goods, and sweetened drinks became staples of working-class diets. There is a fascinating and dark reason for this. Sugar provided cheap, fast calories. Factory workers putting in 12 to 14-hour shifts needed energy, and sugar delivered it faster than almost anything else. Industrialists loved it. because sugary tea and jam sandwiches kept workers moving without the expense of providing substantial meals. Sugar became the fuel of industrial capitalism, and the working class consumed it in quantities that would have shocked earlier generations. The Coca-Cola Company was founded in 1886. By the early 1900s, Coca-Cola was selling millions of bottles per year, each one loaded with sugar. Other soda companies followed. Candy bars hit the market. Breakfast cereals went from plain oats to sugar-coated creations. The 20th century saw sugar consumption in America climb to levels no civilization had ever experienced. By 1970, the average American was consuming over 100 pounds of sugar per year. Think about that. 100 pounds. That is roughly the weight of a large dog consumed in sugar by every man, woman, and child annually. And the sugar industry knew there was a problem. As early as the 1950s, internal research at major sugar companies showed strong links between sugar consumption and heart disease. But instead of sharing this research, the industry buried it. In 1967, the Sugar Research Foundation paid 3 Harvard scientists, the equivalent of roughly $50,000 in today's money, to publish a review that downplayed sugar's role in heart disease and instead blamed dietary fat. The study was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world. It shaped nutritional policy for decades. This is the part that should make you angry. For 30 years, the American public was told that fat was the enemy. Low-fat diets became the standard recommendation. Food companies removed fat from their products and replaced it with sugar to maintain flavor. The result was an explosion of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease that killed millions of people. And the sugar industry knew. They had the data. They chose profit over public health. The cover-up started unraveling in 2016 when researchers at the University of California, San Francisco, discovered the internal sugar industry documents. The papers showed exactly how the industry had manipulated science to protect their product. It was tobacco playbook, applied to food: create doubt, fund friendly research, attack critics, and delay regulation for as long as possible. And while the sugar industry was burying research, a new form of sugar was quietly taking over the American food supply. In the early 1970s, Japanese scientists developed a process for converting cornstarch into a cheap liquid sweetener called high-fructose corn syrup. American corn farmers were already growing far more corn than the country needed, thanks to massive government subsidies. High-fructose corn syrup gave them a new market. By 1984, both Coca-Cola and Pepsi had switched from cane sugar to high-fructose corn syrup in their American products. It was cheaper, easier to transport, and blended into liquid products more smoothly. Within a decade, high-fructose corn syrup had replaced cane sugar in almost every processed food and drink in the United States. Americans were consuming more sugar than ever, and most of them had no idea the source had completely changed. Today, the average American consumes about 17 teaspoons of added sugar per day. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 6 teaspoons for women and 9 for men. We are consuming roughly double to triple the recommended amount. Sugar hides in places most people never check: pasta sauce, bread, salad dressing, yogurt, granola bars. An average flavored yogurt contains more sugar per ounce than a candy bar. A single can of regular soda contains about 10 teaspoons of sugar, more than an entire day's recommended limit in one drink. The health consequences are staggering. Over 42% of American adults are now classified as obese. Over 37 million Americans have diabetes, and another 96 million have prediabetes. Heart disease remains the #1 killer in the United States. And while sugar is not the only factor, decades of research now confirm it is one of the biggest. The global picture is just as alarming. Worldwide sugar production now exceeds 180 million tons per year. Brazil is the largest producer, followed by India, the same country that invented sugar crystallization thousands of years ago. The average person on Earth now consumes about 50 pounds of sugar per year, a number that continues to climb in developing countries as Western diets spread. Some countries have started pushing back. Mexico introduced a soda tax in 2014, and consumption dropped by about 12% in the first year. The United Kingdom followed with its own sugar levy in 2018, which prompted major drinks manufacturers to reformulate their products with less sugar before the tax even took effect. Several cities in the United States, including Berkeley, Philadelphia, and Seattle, have enacted local sugar taxes. Early research suggests these taxes do reduce consumption, though the sugar industry has spent millions lobbying against them. Sugar's story spans 10,000 years, 6 continents, and virtually every major historical event of the last 5 centuries. It was there when empires rose. It was there when millions were enslaved. It was there when revolutions erupted and colonies collapsed. It was there when the Industrial Revolution transformed the world. And it is here now, in almost everything we eat and drink, shaping our health, our economies, and our politics in ways most people never think about. A 10,000-year-old grass from a jungle in New Guinea became the most consequential crop in human history. It built fortunes. It destroyed lives. It toppled empires. And it is sitting in your kitchen right now, in your cereal, your ketchup, your bread, waiting to be noticed. If this story surprised you, subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden histories behind everyday things. We have got a lot more coming.